Are you ready? Can Crushers. It don't really get no better than this the podcast that you're looking for if you're really heavy into wrestling. Hosted by the Mark. Energy that's so amazing. Gotta keep it entertaining. Rep the Can Crusher Nation. Yeah, you know what's going down in the ring. Lights out when you hit a ding ding. Knock 'em out like boom bada bing. Hold it down, you can crown me the king. Got a shout out to the Miz and Duke the Dumpster. We choke slamming everybody. Power driving, hit 'em with a face buster. Yeah, this the show you need and it ain't no need for waiting. Mark, hold it down for the Can Crusher Nation. All about wrestling and keep it entertaining. Can Crushers Wrestling Podcast. Time to break 'em, let's go. Yeah. Can Crushers. Yeah. Can Crushers, let's go.
Hi everyone, this is Ringside Rain and you're listening to Can Crushers Podcast. And now, here is your host, Mark the Mark Martinez.
Welcome everyone. If this is your first time, welcome aboard. I hope you stick and stay for a long time. If you're a long time listener, welcome back to Can Crushers Wrestling Podcast. Thank you, Ringside Rain. I am your host, Mark the Mark Martinez. And boy, am I super stoked, super pumped. All these words that I've used over the years to have my guest come on this week. It is a guest that has been in WWE. She was a manager. She was a wrestler. She doesn't do many podcasts. So yes, I will reach out, pat myself on the back, and say I am super thrilled to have the one, the only, the diva from the other side of the tracks, Cherry, come on Can Crushers. And we're going to talk about her career. We're going to talk about prior to WWE. We're going to talk about, I don't know, is she really a Grease fan? Or was that just a gimmick? A lot of stuff we're going to be talking about here on the show. I am super stoked. I really am. Growing up, I loved the Deuce, Domino, and Cherry thing. I love Grease as well, so maybe that. I'm never John Travolta or like Danny Zuko or Sandy or anybody like that. I'm just like, and I don't know all their names, so I'm not that much of a Grease head. Is that what they're called? Grease head? I don't know. But I'm the guy that sings in the background to Grease Lightning and stuff like that, dancing around, looking like a buffoon. That's me. That's where this all came from. But I love Grease, and that's what Deuce, Domino, and Cherry were to me. That whole 50s type of style, that's what the era in my head that is in my head. Because my mom listened to that type of music as well, so that's engulfed into me. So Cherry resonated with me, and she was like there. She was the new era Elizabeth. Always the do-gooder, but the guys were doing something else dastardly like the Macho Man would. So I want to know how she feels about that compliment, because everybody loves Elizabeth for what she did for the Macho Man. And I saw Cherry kind of going the same way for Deuce and Domino in the WWE. Short time, want to ask about that, if that was just something that kind of came up out of nowhere or released, but there's a lot to unpack in this episode, and I am honored to have Cherry coming on here in mere moments. But you guys know what we have to do first. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you know where to find us. It's all at CanCrusher69. Like, subscribe, do all that cool stuff, interact with us. We'd love that. We love discussions. We bring them back on to the weekly show as well. Where can you find us to listen? Well, you're listening to wherever right now. So it might be Spotify, it might be iTunes, it might be iHeart, it might be Facebook because we posted on there, Google, Stitcher. You guys know, whatever your favorite platform is, continue to listen, rate us, let us know how we're doing, share us. That's awesome too, because that helps with the upticks. It really does. We love talking wrestling. Man, go back and listen to some of the archives, from Manny Fernandez to Gilbert to Rising Stars to, you just don't know. You just don't know who's going to pop up on Can Crushers. And as I said before, I am honored to have Cherry with us this week. And if you really want to help us out, use our promo code when you buy some stuff from Collar and Elbow. Hats, hoodies, tees, all the cool stuff that Al Snow and his hooligans have at Collar and Elbow. Head over, buy some shirts. They're amazing. They're soft. I continue to wear just, Al will punch me in the face, just a generic, property of Collar and Elbow. I love that one. But I also have my dusty one. I have my kind of like pseudo Macho Man where it's Al and Head. And my wrestling one gets worn to conventions and stuff like that. Collar and Elbow has amazing shirts. The fit is awesome. The quality of the tees are awesome. The hoodies are amazing. Go out, buy it. And like I said, when you're checking out, use the promo code CANCRUSHERS. All one word, capital C in can, capital C in crushers, and you'll save 10% on your order. So that's awesome. That's something cool that Collar and Elbow does for us and our listeners. All right, that's enough of me rambling right now. I'm going to get Cherry on the line. But first, go ahead and listen to Al. He'll tell you more about Collar and Elbow. And when we come back, Cherry to talk about WWE, OVW, probably Grease, and anything else that we can roll into the next hour or so. So hang on, guys. I'm super stoked. I'm a little nervous, too. It's Cherry. Yeah!
Wrestling. A love and a passion we all share. I've started a wrestling brand. The wrestling brand. A brand founded on the aspects of wrestling. Two entities working together to create a product that connect emotionally for people everywhere. Collar and Elbow is the brand. Passion and love for wrestling is the drive. I am Al Snow, and this is Collar and Elbow, the wrestling brand.
Hey everybody, this is Cherry. You're listening to Can Crushers Podcast. I hope you enjoy.
And welcome back to Can Crushers Wrestling Podcast. Guys, you heard in the intro how excited I was to talk to my guest today. No him-hawing around, we get right to it. She is the bubblegum chewing, the poodle skirt wearing, roller skating diva, Cherry. Welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you. I love that intro. I appreciate you having me.
My wife helped me a little bit on that. She really did. Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
So before we get into wrestling, how's everything going? You got a lot going on right now. I'm going to spoil this right off the bat. You see you're doing WrestleCade, and I'm super pumped for it.
I am. I have not done it before. I haven't been doing, I space out my appearances. So this will be exciting because apparently there's a lot of people. It is Thanksgiving weekend. So that makes sense as far as, a lot of people being available to appear and a lot of people to be able to show up. So yeah, that'll be fun. I'll only be there on Saturday. And it'll be great. It's just going to be me. Unfortunately, I know everybody wants to see the guys. But hopefully they'll be okay to show up just to see me. So, but it'll be exciting.
They'll be pumped to see you. Yeah. Be prepared. I was there 2019 and I don't know, 5,000 to 10,000 people in and out. It's crazy.
Holy cow. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Enjoy
Nice.
it. And I'm sure you'll meet up with other legends that you haven't seen in a while too and gossip, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Very nice. Across the board, right? Different promotions and different times in my life. So yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah. All right. Before we get to wrestling, again, my wife, very much a wrestling fan as well. She wants to know how much of a Grease fan you really are.
Oh my gosh. Huge. That's a great question. So growing up when, I was born in 75 and I think that's when the movie came out. So when I got old enough, I saw it. I think it was aired on TV and my dad had actually videoed it on VHS. I know.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago. Obsessed, absolutely obsessed with it. And then I just remember rewinding the tape and coming home from school and watching it again and again and again and again. So yeah, initially that whole, back in the day, I watched it like crazy, and, you get into the music and you get into the storyline, and, nor did I feel like I was ever going to like follow that path. But, being such a fan of it back then, it made it easier to transition. I felt a little bit more comfortable relating to that. So what an iconic movie, and so sad that, Olivia is now not with us. So, it's just sad to see when that transition in life happens. So, what an incredible movie, what an iconic movie, and what an iconic actors of every part of it. So yeah, definitely a lot of, we took a lot from that for sure.
Yeah. Did you sing on the bed and everything as well? Like, I was definitely not Danny Zuko. I'm not Danny Zuko whatsoever. I'm like one of the other guys singing Grease Lightning, like this the backstage guy.
Yeah. John Travolta. Oh my gosh, what a heaven sent in that movie. Like, you all wanted to be with John Travolta, but they were just such a great pair, in essence of it. So, and Olivia Newton-John was just perfect, so
She was.
It had all of the elements you needed. You had the baby faces, you had the heels,
right?
and then the end part, where she turns. So, it has every aspect of a wrestling persona that you could ever imagine. So yeah, it was incredible.
All right, let's do the rewind here. Who introduced you to professional wrestling? Mom, Dad, Uncle Joe? Like, how did you find this as a little cherry, I guess you want to say?
Sure. My brother. So, my brother and I, so I have two older sisters and a younger brother, and my brother and I were the one, we were closer in age, so we kind of attached ourselves, and we're just, as younger kids, we're always together. So Saturday mornings, he would hog the Saturday morning TV, and he would watch wrestling. So he was the one that kind of got me into it, not intentionally, but, once he started watching it and I just kind of stuck, eating our cereal, watching TV, you watch that Saturday morning Hulk Hogan, Superstars and all of that stuff. So he got me hooked just because he watched it and I was stuck watching it. So yeah, I mean, my brother was really the influence on that. It wasn't intentional. It was just kind of, he got into it. So that was ultimately where it started. He gravitated out of it, and then I kind of stuck with it. And then there was a few years there where, your younger years start to overtake, and I steered away from wrestling. I wasn't necessarily into it at a couple of years there. So, but then of course gravitated back to watching it. But yeah, my brother got me into it. And the first WrestleMania I treated him to coming along with me. So I said, I'm going to buy your ticket. You're going to stay with me. You're going to do the whole spiel. You're going to be backstage. Like, you got me into this. I need to give you that experience. And, he met everybody. I was able to bring him around and show him that experience and pay him back for it. In essence, he got me involved in it, and I wanted to give that back to him. So, he wasn't as hardcore wrestling fan as I was eventually. He ended up growing out of it very quickly and for much longer. So, of course, very supportive, and, got me, watched when I was in it, and supportive of me getting signed and doing all of that stuff. So, it was fun to be able to bring him to my first WrestleMania, and he got to see, that's the first WrestleMania I had was, Stone Cold's movie Condemned.
Okay.
They did a private viewing for everybody at Mania. So ironically, my brother had to. I ended up doing a signing the time the movie was being shown. So my brother ended up hopping in with Miz and his friends to go to the theater. So yeah, I treated my brother to just an epic weekend of just behind the scenes and all of that to pay him back for getting me to where I was. So ultimately, so yeah.
What a great story that is for your brother. Instead of, no disrespect, Cherry, instead of sitting at a signing, watching you sign for millions of people, he's like, peace out, I'm going to go hang out with the Miz and watch Condemned. I think that's definitely a win too for him, right?
Yeah. And it was just, and I just brought him. The second year I was there, he brought his best friend. So he had, because it was a little weird because I had signings and appearances and stuff. So as great as it was, we weren't going to be able to spend as much time. So the second year I brought him and his best friend in. So in case there was ever a situation where he was with me when I was not doing appearances, but then, Mania happens and I have to be backstage. So he was in the like family booth. So the second year he brought his best friend and we all had a great time. So yeah, I'm still working. So yeah, it was good. So the first year was a little bit of a transition to understand kind of like, unfortunately, they did book me on all of this kind of other stuff. So, I was with him when I could and he understood when I couldn't. So yeah, Miz and his friends were great. They, had my brother tag along, and my brother's really easygoing. So he fit in really well.
That's awesome. Revert back to Saturday mornings, man. That was awesome. Wake up, watch Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, and then slide right into like WrestleMania Superstar Challenge. What were some of your favorites that you kind of, transitioned to as your brother and you were watching it?
Oh my gosh, Macho Man Randy Savage.
Thank you.
Who did not love him?
Right.
He's just epic, iconic, like every word under the sun. Like you can't not be gravitated towards watching him for every aspect of his character, whether it was his personality, whether it was his wrestling persona, was it his wrestling style. Like it was just that, I still have a wrestling collection, baseball card collection.
Yes.
So I still have a huge binder of those wrestling cards. So yeah, it was Savage. Of course, back then Hogan was like it, right?
Right.
Everybody loved Hogan. So I say Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat are my favorite of all time. So that's what kind of drew me into it. But then seeing the different characters that they had, you end up, I don't know how you were when you were growing up, but you have you would sit down and you would go, okay, he's my number one. And then you would go all the way up to whatever, right?
I still do that.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Like Savage is my number one, Ricky Steamboat, and then you just go down the line. So, yeah, so I did that whole thing.
That's all right. We still do. 45, I'm still doing it, right?
Yeah.
So can I ask this, and this is professional questioning, non-professional questioning, however you want to take this. Steamboat Savage, your favorite match of all time, because it is between that. See, I'm going to already judge myself. Between that and then Brett and Owen at WrestleMania 10, those are my two iconic matches. If nobody's ever watched wrestling, you watch those, you'll become a wrestling fan.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just, it's hard to say you can beat WrestleMania 3. It's really just an iconic, they took you on just a ride. And I think that's what we miss, at least I miss in my heart back in the day. They really drew out storylines, whereas nowadays storylines go by very quickly. So back in the day, I think that's what really drew me in, was you bought into it. You seeked oh, they take you to this moment and then you have to wait till next week. And, those storylines were really drawn out. And that was the epic point of that story, was it really drew out, and that, excitement of that match, and they really put a lot into it, really took you on that ride, and it's sad to hear all of these interviews now that, Savage struggled with topping that match, and, coming from thinking of this iconic person and legend that you just really strive to, watch and look for the next thing. It's, there's no need to top that. It'll be remembered for so long. So yeah, that was, there have been great matches for sure, but when I say the one that I will watch over and over and over again would be that one, because it just took you on such an emotional ride. Yeah.
Agreed. All right, so you get out of wrestling for a little bit and, fast forward through schools and all of that. How do you make your way into wrestling? Because a lot of people, unless they've done your homework recently, don't know that you were in the indies for a bit. I don't want to say a while, but a bit. Yeah. How do you make that transition and tell, mom and dad and brother, I'm doing this?
Well, my parents were really lenient as far as when I got older they weren't on top of me about kind of what I was doing, because I kind of proved as a kid, I was a good kid and stayed in line and stuff like that. So, I ended up, falling into watching it again in and around the D-Generation X era, that kind. So I started watching
everybody again. Yeah.
So, I was working for AT&T Wireless, selling cellular phones, and I met a friend whose uncle was an independent promoter. And growing up, I didn't know, oh, I want to be a wrestler. Like, I didn't know you go to wrestling school and this was like a thing. I just enjoyed watching it. I didn't understand the whole background of it. And you learn, you go to a wrestling school and there's like, I didn't understand the whole thing behind it. So, I never understood independent wrestling. I remember seeing posters for it, but I never really paid any attention to it. So anyway, I meet this girlfriend of mine and I become friendly with her, and she's like, I had been intrigued by wrestling again, and I would bring it up in conversation. She's like, you really should talk to my uncle. He's an independent promoter. And I kind of understood maybe what that would have been. So anyway, we got to talking. He's like, oh my gosh, for a girl, you know a lot of information about wrestling. So I was like, yeah, like I've been watching it for like ever. So basically started there, and it was like, we just kind of made a friendship, and, we would talk on Mondays or whatever and talk about wrestling or what was going on or this, that, and the other thing. So he's like, you should come to one of my wrestling shows. And I was like, okay, like whatever. So I would go to the wrestling show as a fan and see what an independent wrestling show was. And, it started to evolve into, well, why don't you be the ring girl for my next one? And then, I would make friends with some of the wrestlers on the show because he's like, hey, this girl's coming down. Just let her do like the ring, like whatever. So I started, life lessons. Networking is really kind of how you get away in life. You meet people, you network, and that's kind of really how I started. He got me to go to these wrestling shows. I made friends with people. I started to be a ring girl. Then they're like, well, why don't you be a manager? And then, it kind of evolved organically from just something slow into something like, I'll just keep doing this until I'm not having fun anymore. So, I was wrestling for quite a while. I was managing for a while. I became friends with Bobcat. I don't know if, that was back in the day. She was one of those the hardcore hoes.
Yeah.
For The Godfather. We knew each other, and she taught me a lot in the independents in the early stages. So we would travel a lot to shows, and we would do a lot of things against each other, and she would tell me a lot. And then I kind of got a little bored. So like her and I would do the typical like girl cat fight, right? So then we would start doing where they would have me taking bumps or giving bumps, right? So I was like, oh, this is interesting. So to learn how to do some of those things, they're like, well, you really need to go to wrestling school, do it right way. So again, it evolved organically. So, I got bored with just being the manager, not doing anything. And then I would start taking bumps and go to the wrestling school, and I started to learn a little bit about wrestling. So, networking, enjoying what I was doing, willing to learn more, and just kind of evolved. And then as you network, you meet more people, and more people are willing to put your name out there, and you do the grind, right? You do the weekend warrior stuff, and you go to these wrestling shows and you introduce yourself. And, as a girl, it's a little easier because sometimes, well, at least back in my day, there was a dime a dozen sometimes. So, and then promoters would be loyal to you. So I was on the independents for quite some time, and always said, as long as I'm enjoying myself, I'll continue doing it. So that's, I was on the independents for a lot of years.
Well, it
for
was
sure.
Roughly 6, right? Am I rounding maybe 5.5, 6?
I was wrestling for a total of 10 years. So I started in 99 when I started going to wrestling shows.
Okay.
So 1999 was my year that November of 1999 was when I started wrestling. So
do you still have, first match on VHS that do you look back or watch it ever?
I don't think so, because I didn't video it myself. And they weren't a lot of videos back then. So like the promoter might have, but I have some fans who send me stuff from, I don't even know if they're getting it from YouTube or whatever. And I just, from time to time see stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember that match, but that's me, and that's crazy. And it's so fun to see. And, I never videoed my own stuff. So I'll get stuff that people will find, which is so fun to see, because it was a learning experience. And then, seeing something like that and remembering that time, it was so much fun. We had so much fun, and I met so many great people, but I don't have my initial first match out there. So, and my parents never even knew that I was doing it, because again, like I said,
the truth comes out now.
Yeah, they weren't against it either, but my parents were very lenient. I had been a good kid, and they didn't really once I got to an age where I was driving, I had my own car, they didn't really check in with me. They weren't really worried. So, I started doing this stuff, and, I didn't have a great high school life. So I started to gravitate towards the wrestling and found some really good friends in wrestling. So they were really fine with it. So I didn't tell them until a year or two into actually indie wrestling that I was doing it. And I think my parents thought I was going to tell them I was pregnant or something. It was so funny. So yeah, I just said, yeah, I've been doing this. And I just thought it was a little bit more serious at that point, because initially wasn't, right?
Right.
So, and they were for it. They were interested in it, and they were, happy that I was doing something I enjoyed, and didn't really understand it, of course, because they weren't really wrestling fans or whatever. But
it was definitely a different era when we grew up compared to right before we went on the air. I told you my son just got his permit and everything, and how freaked out. Our parents, if we were home by the time the lights came on, in my town, I don't know if you, by the time the street lights come on, get your rear end home. But then when you had your license, just be home by midnight. Yes. Yeah. We were running roughshod. We lived. We survived. It's not that era anymore that we can let our kids do that, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not. And I get worried when I don't have any kids, so I get worried when my sister, they tell me their kids are oh, they just ran to they walk to school, they go to the neighbor's house, and I'm like, what?
Yep.
But even though I did that when I was a kid, my mom never knew where we were,
Ever.
But we survived.
For a day, sometimes our parents didn't know where we were.
Yeah, so they didn't know for a good year or two that I was doing this on the weekends. But again, they trusted me. I wasn't a bad kid, and, I stayed in line and stuff like that. So they weren't really worried about that. So
it's good to know that you weren't a hooligan. So,
no, I wasn't.
So how do you get the phone call from essentially Rip Rogers in OVW to make your way down there? We're going to stick and stay with OVW for a little bit because, man, the locker room when you were in OVW, legends.
Yes. Well, they never called me. So the thing that came up with OVW was I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and he was an indie wrestler. His name was Judas Young. And we'd been together for quite some time. So his best friend is Danny Jamundo, otherwise known as Inferno Kid. So now on the indies, I never worked well with my boyfriend. So I never quote unquote managed him. I always worked against him because he had this punk rocker gimmick, whereas Danny Jamundo was just kind of like the club kid. So I managed Danny a lot on the indies as well as other guys. But anyway, so that was our circle. We had a little circle of friends that we hung out with. So Danny had actually moved to Kentucky to pursue a contract. And Danny had mentioned to both of us, hey, OVW is having this tryout training camp for OVW. You should come. So my boyfriend at the time, he had some knee injuries and, all of that stuff. So he wasn't even doing Indies at the time. So I was like, I'll just send an application. I'm not going to get accepted, right? I'm just like, whatever. So I sent an application. I get accepted. I'm like, oh my God, didn't think I would get accepted. So then I'm like, I do Weekend Warrior stuff all the time, right? So I'm like, I'll just go down there, whatever. They hook you up with your tuition is the 3-day class. You stay at the Econo Lodge, you get your own room, the whole thing. And Danny was already there, so that worked out great. So I was like, I'll just go down there for the weekend, right? No big deal. I do that all the time. So I go down and I do the program, and they're very clear it's OVW. Now, OVW was the developmental for WWE at the time, but Danny Davis, owner of OVW, was very clear this was not getting seen by WWE or whatever. So you go and, that's what you do. You hone your craft and you learn from different territories, right? So went down there and I ended up being one of 2 girls in the whole class. There was 30 people, right?
Right.
So I ended up knowing a few. So I had Damian Adams, who I actually trained with at home. So when I would go to the wrestling school on my own, he was really my first full-on trainer. He was just a friend of mine, and was kind enough to help me out at the wrestling school that we would go to and stuff like that. So he was there. Most Sexy was there. Mario, one of my other Jersey friends. Pat Buck was actually there, who was Rooster in the Indies forever ago. So I had known very few people. So I did the school. The other girl, I don't know what really happened. She would like hide in the bathroom. It was super bizarre, but
that bathroom at Davis's Arena is weird too, by the way.
Yeah, it's so small. So I did the weekend, got to spend time with Danny and his girlfriend, but still did like the wrestling thing. And then that weekend I come back to normal life and I called Danny Davis and I'm like, hey, I really appreciate you having me. I had a good time. And he said, we really loved having you. And we think that you have a lot of potential. And, if you're willing, we would love to invite you to, come and work at OVW. So I was like floored. Like I didn't think anything would really come of it. Right. So ironically at the time I was working at a job that I loved and enjoyed and had a 401k company and, was really kind of getting paid really well and enjoyed my job. And I took a risk. My boyfriend, Judas Young at the time, couldn't go. And I took a big leap of faith. Something in my heart was telling me I need to go and try this. So I left a job I loved, making very good money, 401k, all of that stuff, lived with my boyfriend, moved to Kentucky. He didn't come with me. He stayed home in New Jersey for an opportunity. And luckily Danny was living in a fourplex in Louisville and the apartment across the hall from him and his girlfriend was available. So didn't know what it looked like. I just felt comfortable that I was across the hall from my friend and his girlfriend. So that made me feel comfortable and just uprooted my life. I would waitress during the day. I would go to wrestling school at night, do wrestling shows on the weekends, do their TVs on Wednesdays. I just engulfed myself in the wrestling world down there. So, I took the opportunity and ran with it. So they never called me. I went out seeking it, really. So that's kind of how OVW happened.
That's awesome. And the fans just trickled right to you. Like it was a slow burn because friends down in Kentucky. I'm in Pennsylvania, but I have now friends in Kentucky tape trading, years back watching old OVW stuff. It was just like a slow burn and then boom, like Cherry was it down there. Like you guys, along with Deuce and Domino as well. I mean, I'm not disrespecting the boys. I know they're part of your whole story as well, but we're talking about you today. Boom, you just took off. Like they loved it. They loved it down there.
Well, and I have to really credit the boys. I mean,
right.
Like they came up with the gimmick initially. Jimmy and I started wrestling the same month and same year in New Jersey. He would just wrestle with his dad and train, and I would wrestle with the kids from the school. So we knew each other very well. Enough, I should say, not very well, but we knew each other enough. So, I credit them and thank them, and I'm blessed to have had that networking and had that friendship. I didn't know Cliff until I got down there. So they came up with that gimmick and I was lucky enough for them to have chosen me for an opportunity. So, and when Jimmy presented it to me and said, hey, we want this girl, we want her roller skates, the old school roller skates. We don't know what she looks like. We don't know what her name is. You got to kind of come up with it. It was insane. It was great. Like it just spoke to my soul, as far as something. I, of course, started frantically thinking, like, what does this person look like? I don't know. You automatically go to those poodle skirts, right? So I'm very thankful. I mean, I think it was a unique gimmick. I know I occasionally will get people that compare us to the Honky Tonk Man, but we were totally different. Totally different.
Totally. I don't see that at all, but okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. I didn't either, but people, it was the 50-ish area, but I think that we did it very uniquely. Honky Tonk had Peggy Sue, and that wasn't anything, it's a completely different thing. But I think that we were very unique in that aspect. So I was very blessed to have been invited into that opportunity again, to be able to do that. And I thought it was a great thing. I thought we had a great thing going. So, goes to show, and I got to be Cherry very quickly once I got to OVW. So, all of that happened very quickly. Whereas like people like Beth Phoenix or Nick Dinsmore, they were there for quite some time. A lot of people were there in OVW for quite some time, and, not necessarily OVW, but you do the grind and you work the weekends and you try to get your name out there and you network, and people wait years and years and years before they're able to make that transition over to a contract. So I'm very blessed to have had the journey that I did, and the people that gave me those opportunities to live the dream that I did. I loved the Cherry gimmick. And the boys really allowed me to create what I thought she would be. And they never pulled me back from any of that. So, yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of good times.
So the locker room at OVW, you brought up Beth, but Alicia Fox was also there. Callie Kelly was also there. I mean, Natty, the list, right? It was amazing. Is that where like a lot of the friendships prior to like the SmackDown, because we're going to trickle up to that here in a second, that's where everything kind of blossomed? And that wasn't supposed to be a pun. Sorry, that just came through my head right now. Is that where everything blossomed in right there?
Well, OVW is very close knit when it comes to that, and you're all, the girls were in their own locker room, the boys were in theirs. It's a very small arena, and you are all there for one purpose, right?
Right.
So yeah, we became very close. And at the time it was a smaller crew. So yeah, when I first got there, Ken Kennedy was there. Johnny Jeter was there. Ken Doan was there. Mike Mondo was there. Paul Burchill. So there was quite a locker room, and the transition of trainers was going on as well. So, I think Lance Storm had just left. Al Snow had just come in. Paul started to do the thing. Jim Cornette had just left, so Paul could come in. Jim Cornette had gotten let go or whatever. So yeah, I mean, we were all there for one purpose. And I think OVW gave us such a learning, kind of opportunity, because when you're in OVW, everybody is serving the same purpose. So we're all there for creative. We all have our own input. Whereas when you go to WWE, there's a bigger machine. So my time in OVW was definitely the most precious, because we were all so close, all the girls, all the guys, even with Al Snow and Danny and Rip, and, we were all there for the same love, and we were able to be very creative when we had discussions about a match or a storyline that we were doing. Every person, including Al, would get into a conversation and say, this is what we should do. How do we get to here? How do we get to there? You don't get that at WWE. They have bigger producers and agents and everybody else, and the bigger machine that kind of creates that for you. Yes, you can put your input in, but when you're on the lower part of the card, you don't really have that much of the input as you did when you were in OVW. So obviously your John Cena's, your Randy Orton's, your Roman Reigns, all of those will have a lot more weight into their opinion, but when you're on a lower part of the card, you don't. So yeah, OVW was precious, because we all had a purpose, and it was the same purpose. So, yeah, we were close. I mean, Alicia was there, Shelly was there, Beth was there, Barbie was there. We had Katie Burchill, Serena Deeb. We had CM Punk and had just come in, and Brent Albright and Seth Skyfire and Idol, or Damian Sandow. So it was so much fun.
Who's who. It literally, who's who back then. Unbelievable. Any Al stories? Because we love throwing them under the bus on this podcast.
Al's very fun. I have to credit Al for really making wrestling make sense to me, because sometimes on the indies you don't learn from the right people. So obviously when I finally got signed, his teaching made sense to me. I'm not an easy learner. I have to have the right teacher, and Al just said it in a way that I was able to get it and grasp it. So he made a lot of sense to me as far as being able to put wrestling together. I had a gist of it, but it didn't really hit home. it didn't really resonate with me until Al kind of broke it down for me. Now, Rip was great. Rip teaches you the basics. You know, you have to learn how to do the basics before you build that house. So Rip taught me the basics, and that was great. But Al really broke down the psychology to me. So, Al was fun. You know, he really gave us an opening to say what we wanted and shared our opinions, and, just goofy, but he, you know, and I really appreciate goofy. Al, because a lot of times we would do these get to know you days. So instead of wrestling constantly, because at the time when we were down there, you know, we were doing really, really well. So we would wrestle during the day between like 10 and 2, I think practice was. And then, we were booking a lot of shows. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we'd have wrestling during the day and then do shows at night. TV was Wednesdays, and then Friday, Saturdays, you know, we would have shows, if not double booked. We were doing really well with bookings down there. So Al would create these sporadic, not often, get to know you days where he took us to Great Adventure, and we all just went to the water park and just really kind of bonded, you know, as far as the OVW family. So, you know, it's not always about that bump card, you know, yep. Which Al always said, you know, you take so many bumps and you take it off of your bump card. So, it was about getting to know the family that you're in. So, one of the funny stories was, so Al, you know, if you ever wanted to go to a show and you weren't going to go like on your own, you could always go to OVW Arena and then follow the ring truck, right? So there was oh my God, what was his name? Rambola. His name was Rambola. He was an indie guy. He was assigned to the contracted class. He was just a weird bird, and he was so nice and so funny. But so Cliff or Domino who's just a ham. He's so funny. He would call Al on a prank call, and he's like, you know, what time does the ring truck leave? And Al would be like, whatever the time was. And he's like, and Cliff would play like he was this guy, Rambola, who was a weird bird, right? And he would say, well, and he would negotiate the time the ring truck would leave. It was so funny. And it would like be back from a show, because we had shows every day, right? At that point. So, you know, and we would be riding back from the show, and Domino would pull this like prank call to Al in the car. And it was just like, you know, Al's like, the ring truck's leaving at 5. And he's like, well, what about like, you know, 5:15? I was like, no, it leaves at 5. And he just, and Domino was able to like do the Rambola's voice. So, oh my God. Yeah. So, we had a good time. I mean, it's just precious, those moments. So yeah, Al Snow's great. There's a reason why he's such a good trainer.
He really is a super genius. A couple of years ago, I got to sit down with him during one of his classes, and like he beat the snot, and I don't mean it mean, but he beat the snot out of the kids when they were training. Then he's like, hey, 5-minute water break. But then he just started talking about the psychology of why he was beating the snot out of them. Like, there was no dead time of teaching when Al was in the ring teaching. If you wanted to drink, you better keep your ears open instead of going party or have a smoke or whatever. Yeah, he's unbelievable. He just has a love
for the business, and you can just tell. You can feel his passion.
Yeah. You know he's also a dolphin trainer, right?
No.
Yeah.
Is that new?
I was told he's from one of his business partners. I was told he's also a dolphin trainer when they go to Florida. He trains dolphins as well.
I've never heard that.
Yeah. Yeah. If you run into him, ask him.
Okay.
So you get the call up essentially then to WWE, let's just say the main roster, because it was developmental, up to SmackDown. But it wasn't supposed to be SmackDown at first, was it?
So what happened was we got signed very quickly. So long story short, so Jimmy approaches me about this Cherry gimmick. and nobody knew about it. They just knew in the contracted class. Now Cliff or Domino was going to contracted class, and not a lot of non-signed people were allowed to, but he somehow got into it. So him and Jimmy were working on this greasers gimmick because they would have promo day where they would just work on promos as opposed to wrestling. So they'd come up with this gimmick, and they were doing these promos, and they showed me these tapes of these promos they were doing. And Domino came up with the gimmick of having a girl on old school roller skates, right? So, long story short, so Jimmy knew me from back in the day, and they kind of cased the Davis Arena and was like, who could really be this girl? And Jimmy knew my work ethic, or so he says, and said he approached me about it. So I was like, yeah, like great. So they showed me the gimmick, come up with it. Now this was a Wednesday night, so we had just finished taping TV. After TV, we come out, we have a discussion, and then go home for the night. So Jimmy approached me that night and says, hey, after the show, like, come see these promos. So Jimmy showed me these promos of what they were doing. So he's like, that Tuesday, Johnny Ace and the office were coming down, and they would do it periodically to evaluate the talent that they had down there. Who's going to come up, whatever. So he's like, we want to present this. So again, we just want you on old school roller skates. We don't know what her name is. We don't know what she looks like, blah, 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 blah. So I had a week to get it together. Long story short, again, come Monday night, Jimmy said that Danny told him I wasn't allowed to come because when the office comes, it's only contracted people. So he broke the news to me, which I was super bummed about.
Yeah, for sure.
However, yeah, so it was a Monday night. My boyfriend, Judas Young, had already planned on coming to visit me that Thursday. So I was like, oh, super bummed, like whatever, I was like, I'll just clean the apartment, like get ready for him to come visit or whatever. So Jimmy's like, just get ready. I'm going to do whatever I can to convince him to let you come. So, I did my thing and I got ready, and he calls me on Tuesday morning. He's like, get down here. So I was like, oh my God. So I run down there, and I run into the Davis Arena. Now everybody's already there, right? Because this was already pre-planned. But so I run in, and I don't know if you've been to the Davis Arena, and I think it's changed since, but as you come in on the right side, you like take a door to go down into the back to the locker rooms. So I open the door, and who do I see? Rip Rogers, right? And he shoots me this death stare, but I couldn't tell him because like the whole gimmick that we were working on was between the three of us. So I couldn't tell Rip, and he didn't know, like, I'm not like late. Like I just didn't want to disappoint Rip, but there was no time to explain to him, like, I'm not late. Like nobody knew. And like I didn't have time because like Rip was there in a group with like Danny Davis and Johnny Ace and blah, 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 blah. So there's like a whole bunch of people. So like, so I'm like running into the girls' locker room to change. So long story short, we do the whole day and we get signed that day. Well, that was a Tuesday. So then the very next day, the office tells Paul Heyman to write us into the show and debut us. So it was kind of like the like how we came together, right?
Right.
So then I get a call on Thursday. Now we're at St. Teresa's, and I get a call from Krista Joseph, and he's like, you guys are, no, was that it? No, that was when we were actually debuting on SmackDown. So I get a call, and they're like, you guys are going on the road this weekend, and we're going to debut you guys on Raw on Monday. And I was like, holy crap, like this is all within a week, right?
Yeah. You got 3 days to get there, essentially.
Right. So, well, remember, I had my boyfriend coming in that Thursday. So Thursday morning, I get a call. I'm about to pick my boyfriend up from the airport to spend the week with me. And I'm like, have to break the news to him. Like, they're sending us. Now, he knew. He was the first person I called when I got signed. So he knew. And I'm like, they're sending us on the road Friday morning. So thankfully, Danny was, again, back to his story. He lived across the hall from me. So he had his best friend there to kill time while I, went out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So we were supposed to debut on Raw on Monday. I think Billy Graham had done a book at the time, and we were supposed to like crash his like book announcement or something like that. Well, they ended up kiboshing that and we never debuted, which was great because in actuality, we had really kind of just put our trio together for a week, ultimately. So they just, for whatever reason, decided not to debut us on Raw. So we went back down to OVW for really ultimately a year, which was a blessing in disguise because we really marinated with each other. We got the chemistry together. We marinated with the personalities. We really got the gimmick together, whereas it was only just a week. So it was really a blessing in disguise. So yeah, they were going to debut us on Raw, and then we debuted on SmackDown a year to the day that Cliff and I got signed.
That's
So,
crazy. I didn't know a year to the day. That's awesome.
It was weird. Yeah, a year to the day, and we debuted in Little Rock, Arkansas. So that's when Krista Joseph called me that Thursday, and we were at St. Teresa's getting ready to do an OVW show. And they really, and Nova mentioned, or Simon Dean mentioned this, how the office really treated me as a manager. So like if they needed the boys somewhere or whatever they were doing with us, they would call me, and then I would orchestrate everything. So, which was fine with me. You know, I'm just that way. I like to plan things. So, and they were fine with it. So, yeah, so they called me and I said, we're going to SmackDown. So, yeah,
the emotions
that's how that
are crazy. I knew there was a little hitch in the giddy up somewhere, but I didn't know that whole story. That's unbelievable. And like
it was
you said,
a blessing.
Yeah, like you said, it helps build then the whole, you know, Deuce, Domino, and Cherry of being that threesome then.
Yeah, for real. It really was because, and then we ended up going off into a program with Cody Rhodes and Shawn Spears that ended up being really epic. You know, so that was a blessing in disguise, and we really enjoyed working with those guys. So, what an incredible storyline. So, yeah, that was our transition to the main roster.
That's some of the tapes that I did see from my buddy down there now. Unbelievable matches. Matches.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Some say, okay, and I am some of the some, that you are the new era Elizabeth because she was so quiet and I don't want to say naive, but like just the good person to Macho Man's bad. You were the good to Deuce and Domino. How does that make you feel?
I love that feeling. And I did take a lot of what she offered in the Cherry character. So, and I'm blessed to have had an opportunity to walk in a little bit of those shoes. So yes, she was my inspiration idol forever. And, you know, when I was able to be an OVW, you know, I tried to emulate a lot of those things. And our dynamic was really, and the office really wanted to know our dynamic. So that's where Paul Heyman was like, how does this trio come together? So that's when we said Domino was my brother, Deuce was my boyfriend. They were the heels and I was the baby face ultimately, but just loved watching them beat people up. And that was kind of where we were trying to get that across was, you know, you had that savage Elizabeth thing, you know, he was a heel. She was more of a baby face, right? So, you know, I'm so blessed to have in my version of it, be able to live through some of those things. And I took a lot of what she did in her career as opportunities to creatively replicate some of that. So a lot of the OVW stuff, because we were able to do a lot of input, I was able to, you know, use some of that in the storylines that we had. And, you know, for instance, you know, we had the time where Deuce and Domino are so obsessed with getting the titles back that, you know, Deuce says, you know, Cherry's on the line, and they use that like stand, they make a stand, kind of that Saturday night main event that Savage had with, you know, Georgie Animal Steel, and they put Elizabeth on that little lifeguard stand. And, you know, ultimately George could have won Elizabeth. And, you know, a lot of that stuff I took from her. There was another spot where, you know, Deuce and Domino jumped Cody and Shawn in their match. And, you know, the storyline was like me and Shawn were kind of sweet on each other, right? So it was where I jumped in front of Shawn because Deuce was going to give him this crack him in the mouth. And then Deuce like pushes me to the side. Like I took a lot of her from that. That's why it's just really disappointing. There was so much more to our dynamic and, so much more dimension to our characters that we could have done in WWE. So, I did, when there were times and opportunities for me to pitch something, I definitely took from a lot of her. The belts I wore were sequins, and, she wore a lot of sequins when she first came out. And, there were little pieces of her that I took with me as a Cherry character, because she was such an inspiration to me. So to be able to do some of those things that she did in her career and replicate them was epic. Like who in their lifetime ever says they're able to walk in their idol shoes just a little bit? I'm able to say that. So, every aspect of it, because I think it was unique. 2 heels with a babyface manager, and then you have the opportunity to turn her heel. And, there's so many ways you can do that dynamic and storyline. And, it's just, we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun over VW. I just wish we could have done a lot more in WWE.
Yeah. And that was my next question. Like, when you started your singles career, was the whole, you starting your singles career and then Deuce and Domino going with, Maurice, was that that seemed a little wonky. Even that, then that, like, you started wrestling and then all of a sudden you were just disregarded by them. What was that written that way, or was it just thrown?
That whole transition was a little weird. How it kind of came about. I always say, I don't know if that diva competition was rigged or not. Either way, I was very fortunate to be involved. Vince was very delicate with me in the beginning to not include me in some of that stuff, because he protected me a lot, because ultimately I thought, ultimately I thought that there was going to be a payoff with me getting a lot more involved or whatever, because we, like in OVW, we were very delicate as far as anybody touching me.
Right.
I didn't take any bumps. I didn't, it was the big payoff was someone getting their hands on Cherry, or whether that was a good or a bad thing, So initially when I first got up there, like, I wasn't involved in a lot of the diva stuff. And then out of nowhere, they include me in this diva competition, which ultimately we all knew was all about Michelle, right? No offense. So, and I don't know Maurice is a gorgeous girl, right? There's no doubt about it. So for her to get to be the first one out of all of us to be eliminated, they didn't tell us anything. They just said, you're going to go up there, there's going to be voting, and then we're going to tell you who's eliminated. And Maurice was eliminated. They didn't give us an Iggy. They didn't tell us like the deal. Like, they didn't give us like the inside scoop. Like, none of us knew if it was real. So she gets eliminated first. It was bizarre. If there was a plan, it wasn't presented to me, or I was never informed. So I just know Maurice was initially eliminated out of the first round. I stuck around. The boys weren't being used at the time. I was being used. They were going full steam ahead. I always tell the story. Elijah Burke had pulled me aside, and he was like, because I knew him from OVW, right?
Right.
Good dude. And I said, and he goes, what do you think of this competition? And I said, Elijah, look, if this is a work and people, and the office is not really using the votes, then the office wants me there. Or the people are really voting me to number 2 of all of these divas. Either way, it's a win-win for me. We all knew it was going to be Michelle. Either way, it was a win-win for me. And he was proud of me for recognizing that. So, I don't know why again, that goes into what WWE is. It's a bigger machine.
Right.
And you're not always privileged when you're at that low part of the card to know the meaning behind anything sometimes. So I just rode the wave, and, Arn Anderson was a big advocate for me, and he just said that they were really high on me. And, I don't know if that was the fans voting me there or the office voting me there. I was thrilled with it either way. So, I think it was, I don't know if it was a plan all along or if it just organically was like, let's do something with Maurice. Because honestly, Maurice wasn't doing anything at the time. She was floundering around. She was doing Welcome to Friday Night SmackDowns and wasn't really doing anything. And then of course the boys weren't. So it was just another opportunity for them to create that storyline. It was weird. It was weird. It was too soon for me, but I don't know. They don't give you that information. At least when you're that, I mean, we were new, so they don't tell you that stuff. So I knew that Arn told me they were high on me. They wanted to do a lot of things with me. They weren't really using the boys. I don't know. I wasn't privileged to know that information, to be honest.
Were you? There's some. I don't want to keep you long, but I have like a couple more I really want to get to. Were you shocked then by your release from WWE? That kind of came out of nowhere as well, because you were on, as a fan, we all thought you were on that high.
Yeah. Well, I was let go so they let people go 1 week, and Domino was let go that week, and then I was let go the second week. I was at the gym with my trainer, and I went back to my locker room I was getting ready to leave, and I saw the call from 203, which is Connecticut area code. I was like, that's not good. So I was upset. I was really, really upset. But they let talent go for 2 weeks, and then they took another 2 weeks to let a lot of people in corporate go. It was the economy at the time. Regardless of what people were saying, and it was very hurtful because people were like, oh, they let her go. She wasn't, she was, her size, and it was super hurtful. So not only did I let go from my dream, but I had fans and internet people saying some really, and I don't think that they did it on purpose, but it affected me a lot, because they were saying, oh, she was fat and she was this. Like, I'm being told I was 129 pounds at the time, 129 pounds. And people are calling me fat. Like,
that's ignorant. Sorry.
It was hard. It was hard. I definitely went into a dark place at that point because I lost my dream. And then I would do indie signings and people were like, I like a big boned girl. Like, and again, they just didn't understand what they were saying. And of course my headspace and mental space was totally different. So it was hurtful. It was hurtful, but it was a blessing in disguise because I was in a bad place at the time and I was stressed and, I wasn't investing in myself. I had gotten super insecure, being up there next to all of these girls that were genetically gifted. I'm a normal girl, I'm not a bikini model who's genetically gifted. And, I'm a normal girl and I just got in my own head. These girls were great to me. They were very kind and very nice, but I got in my own head and I allowed my own insecurity to get ahead of myself. So it was a downward spiral for me. But looking back on it, it's like Beth always told me, never do anything that stresses you out. It's not worth it. So looking back on it, I was absolutely devastated. I got into a dark place in my life. And then to hear people say the things that they were saying, Johnny Ace did not say anything about my weight. Not one thing about my weight. And it was only me and Johnny Ace on the call when he did release me. So it's really infuriating now to think that these people had these opinions of me. It's like, that's really what you thought, because if that was the case, it's not what Johnny told me. And there's a lot of diversity now, especially with what is a performer. So it took me to a dark place and it took me a long time to get out of that. So, it was abrupt, but at the time the economy was an issue. So it was hurtful. And I think a lot of people that are released is hurtful because then they turn around and sign Gail Kim and then they debut the Bellas. And, it's like, okay, well, economy is an issue, but then you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like that, and then you struggle with that, so, no offense to those girls, cause they're great. And, they're all very sweet and kind. It's not their decision, but you know, it was a blessing in disguise. So all in all, I lived a dream that I never thought I would. I'm happy to and thrilled that I'm able to have contributed to people's happiness and entertainment and enjoyment. I'm just sad that, number one, it was let go soon, and number two, Deuce, Domino, and Cherry had so much more to offer to entertainment.
They did. They really did.
We had a lot more to give. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen. So, but I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. So I just have to be blessed for the opportunities that I did get and the road that I did ride. So
yeah, for sure. I'm feeling for you right now. Like you have me choked up because I didn't hear any of that. Well, because I didn't hear any of like the chubby stuff that they would call it a Mickey or anything like that. Like that's, wrestling fans are good, but wrestling fans are horrible as well. And I'll say it. You didn't say it. Cherry did not say it. Don't come at her. I said it. That's just, sometimes you just like, get out of your mom's basement. Sorry.
Well, and females are just very insecure to begin with, you know, so I think all females are very aware of their appearance, especially when you're being magnetized on TV. So, I allowed myself to not be secure enough. So it was my, you know, I had a contribution to that. So
I have two more and then I'll let you say whatever you want. Is there ever a chance that we see you roller skating into a Royal Rumble? They make that phone call. Would you do it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Who doesn't love that surprise?
Yeah. I would hope. Let's make that a hashtag. I don't know if it started. Let's get Cherry into the Royal Rumble. What has wrestling brought to you then in a whole, like for your whole life? What's it mean that you were a professional wrestler? And even some fans that said that, you've touched a lot of us. Like you were that innocent little girl that protected the guys sometimes, and like that storyline was amazing. So what does that do for you?
That personally fulfills a dream of mine, but it also makes me happy that I'm able to bring the same kind of happiness to somebody else that I felt when I watched Savage and Elizabeth or Steamboat. You know, it's like we all have a true love for an industry, and to be able to watch it and get fulfillment from it and escape reality for a little while, but then to also contribute to that speaks volumes. You know, not everybody has that opportunity, and to know that I've lived both sides of the spectrums, coming from a child that never knew you go to a wrestling school and how you become a professional wrestler, and you know, this stuff is how it's learned. It's an incredible evolution to know, because many people will never be able to say I lived my dream.
Right. So,
and to be able to bring excitement to people the way I felt it following my idols. So it's a full circle for me.
So what's up for today? I don't mean like physically today. What's up for today for Cherry? We see you hanging out with Nat a lot. I love your dogs. If you follow you on Instagram, like what do you do today?
I'm very private today. Traveling was a lot for me. You know, traveling overseas and living out of a suitcase. And you know, I always said when I was on the road, I slept better in hotels than I did in my own home. So. Yeah, I live, excuse me, 5 minutes from Natty. We're very, very close. She's a sweetheart. And I just live a very private life, and I enjoy my dog, and she's the love of my life, and just living life is hard. So it's really focusing on, you know, what matters in life and not letting those negative things, you know, hold you down. So life happens very quickly. So you have to really cherish those moments and find things that make you happy, because everything that's happened for a reason, but it's how you come out of it. You know, you don't become a stronger being a winner. You become stronger because you fail. So,
I love that.
Yeah, being with Natty, she's, who would have thought that we would have created the friendship that we did, but she's incredible. Her family's incredible. And just being very private, home and chilling with my dog and just enjoying life as it is, because life is too short. In this industry, you find out that it is very short. So, we always, Natty, TJ, and I always say, like, oh, people are like, well, why don't you go to the Caribbean on vacation and blah, 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 blah. It's like being home in my own house is really just such a paradise to me.
I agree. Thank you for saying that. We say that loud in the back so my wife can hear it when she's listening to this podcast.
Yeah. Life's hard enough, and I just find, you have your hard days, but you have your good ones. And I'm in a very good place in my life, and I've overcome a lot, but I cherish every moment. I just started offering up photos, which I didn't really realize that people still wanted on Twitter and Instagram. And I've got an outpouring of people that are looking for merchandise for Cherry. So, I've tried to accommodate those things, and, I'm happy to, I wish we did more, but I'm happy with what we did. So, to contribute to the industry, which is always still at heart, we're all wrestling fans. So if you're not a wrestling fan, you don't get it. But when you're a wrestling fan, you get it. There's something about it that just pulls you in, and you, as much as you get aggravated with it or not, you always go back to it. So,
touche.
It's a unique person. So,
all right.
Yeah.
One last thing. Go ahead and you're going to be tagged in all this anyway, but let everybody know your socials. And then the final question: how much wrestling do you watch now?
I do watch a lot. I mean, of course, I watch Natty and the girls. I'm super intrigued by how we've evolved as women in this industry, and the evolution, and now that we have our own Rumble and things like that. So, as opposed to watching the whole product, I definitely feel like I do a lot of more focus on the women's side of it. But I do. I mean, when I can, I definitely tape it. So sometimes it may not be when it's being live produced. I don't watch it necessarily, but I do watch it eventually. That love's still there. So yeah, I watch the NXT, I watch the AEW, I watch WWE, and it's just, I always gravitate towards that eventually in my day. So so I'm on Twitter as former Diva Cherry. I'm on Instagram as DDC Chick. I do cameo videos as well. I do not have a Facebook. I know there's fake Facebooks out there. They are not me. I don't do Facebook. So do not buy into that, because I get some information on people and I'm like, sorry, sweetie, I'm not on Facebook. So, and then I also have some merchandise on ProWrestlingTees.com, which I'm doing really well with merchandise, which is great. Some t-shirts and some stickers and things like that. So, I mean, I love that people loved it as much as we did. It was unique. It was a unique gimmick. And, the fact that they invested in us with those old school cars was, showed what they really,
that was
really
lots of bucks.
So.
Yeah.
I did a photo shoot with those cars every week. So, it was a lot of fun. So.
Cherry, thank you for spending some time with us tonight. It was awesome. Like I said, as we started, I will see you at WrestleCade. Pump that up too. Guys, if you want to meet her, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Thanksgiving weekend. She's going to be there Saturday, signing autographs, taking pictures too.
Yep.
All
Absolutely.
That. Come down. It'll be a blast. Again, thank you for spending some time, Cherry.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Can Crusher Nation, once again, that was the bubblegum chewing, poodle skirt wearing, roller skating diva from the other side of the tracks, Cherry. What a fun interview. I sat here and I just listened, and as she was talking, I did do some tape trading back in the day to watch some OVW stuff, and just continuing to watch, and I put all those memories, and I just let Cherry talk to go down memory lane. I loved it. I love learning about her and Nat. I really did, the fast forward to the end of it, how close they live together, and they're besties. They're besties forever, and it's just so much to unpack in this one that it was so fun. I love learning about more of her prior to WWE stuff. I thought it was only like 6 or 7 years, as you heard in the podcast, that she was on the independent circuit, where it was a lot longer. And then just how everything came about really quick to getting to WWE, and then there was a pause because Superstar Billy Graham. Yeah, what the heck? Cool little tidbits there from Cherry. I had a blast, guys. Go out, follow her, and I'm gonna wave the flag. Make sure you when she's out and about, like she's going to be in WrestleCade. It is this Thanksgiving weekend. Go out. Winston-Salem, North Carolina. If you can get there, go out and meet her. She really does love her fans. You heard it in everything that she said. She wished she could have did a little bit more, but what she did, she knows that it touched people. And it was really fun what she was doing and just living the life now, living a happy life. And I agree with her. There's no reason to go to, Turk and Caicos or this beach. Enjoy yourself at home. Surround yourself by your family and your loved ones and just chill. Be you. Live your life. Live what makes you happy. That's what I got out of this. And you know how I try to learn something each and every time when I talk to somebody. That's what I got from Cherry. Man, again, Cherry, thank you for coming on Can Crushers Wrestling Podcast. It was an honor to have you on. And I can't wait to see you at WrestleCade. Remember, guys, just because you're trash doesn't mean you can't do great things. It's called a garbage can, not a garbage cannot.